Chapter 2. Last chapter I covered the concept that the Homo sapien DNA has been added to from very early in its development, and possibly beforehand with genetic engineering. So from now on I intend to provide more detailed evidence linking these occurrences, which become quite convoluted. It's like a three-dimensional game of chess, but here we go. Now, as we return to Africa, we find that haplogroup E males populate all of Africa nowadays, possibly along with remnants of A and maybe B, but we can't find maps for B. While C males travelled the earth for thousands of years without changing partners or blood groups. But at some stage, C-type males, who were still all over the continent, were introduced to the new mitochondrial EV13 as she came up through Greece. And their sons became the fathers of the new CF line, which actually is FGHI line. And I will endeavour to show that this is where the new blood group A was introduced and spread, while some folk still retained O blood. And I contend that the elites and rulers who ruled old Europe lost the primate factor and were Rh negative. Whereas from the Horn of Africa, mitochondrial EV32 females bred with the T males there, and then went to Samaria and India, mixing with C males. Their daughters were the start of mitochondrial M, with sons who were mitochondrial M also, and the start of B blood group. I contend this explains the royal lines of Demeter, Cleopatra, Sheba, Helen of Troy, the Minoan and Persian princesses, and their royal sons, onto the various modern royal lines, who apparently now are mitochondrial EV hybrids with mitochondrial H DNA and O negative blood group. But not all the male E's had royal blood. We see male E1B1B spread south and all over Africa from the same area as EV13 males that were in old Europe. But I contend they have non-royal mothers, who were either mitochondrial L4 to 6 or mitochondrial N. Hence we see a mixture of Africans with O-positive blood group. Mitochondrial EV appeared along the Nile from nowhere, with no apparent human female lineage, and she was not part of mitochondrial L, N, M or R founder groups. We see mitochondrial EV firstly in Egypt and Ethiopia, later bringing goddesses to old Europe and Asia. So where was the original mitochondrial E from, and what made her royal? Who's her daddy? I suggest this is explained by the story of Atlantis of the Sands, having been the Middle East. Geological research suggests that the Middle East was an island at some stage, totally separated from the mainland by the Red Sea, Mediterranean Sea, Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf. Stan Dwyer says a meteorite crashed in the Indian Ocean, changing the topography and the course of human development. He explains the southern corner of Arabia was covered by a large slab of oceanic crust called upholite that resulted from the meteor, tilting the opposite end upwards, and it was no longer surrounded by water. Apparently all cattle on Earth can be traced back to cattle that originated there on the Fertile Crescent, which supports it having been isolated and vegetated. Later on, Arabia was an ancient spice trade link and wealthy from growing frankincense that was burned in pagan temples, but is now mostly desert. The early inhabitants of the Middle East and North Africa have always been T and J males. The ancient clans seen there are possibly related to whoever built the strange, ancient, unexplained rock structures said to be linked with Poseidon, which remain in the Nabatean region, north end of the Red Sea, now surrounded by desert. These population areas of J and T males who densely populated the ancient Middle East, in my view, have links with the Atlantian demigods who fled after the catastrophe, to be the patriarchs of the mitochondrial E dynasty hidden inside FGHI, J and K, when they returned. So now we get to the FGHI group. As we saw, the male line of E does not give rise to F. Yet, mitochondrial EV is present along the region that became Judah, where the male F and G appear. I think we can assume that F and G started in Judah before going up to the Caucasus Mountains. I propose that F males had F sons with mitochondrial EV12, but as well had sons with mitochondrial N mothers who were also present in those areas long before with the C males, as we've said. So then perhaps their hybrid sons became G with mitochondrial N1 mothers, retaining some royal DNA. It appears that male F and G retreated to the Caucasus and F did not survive past this era, while G2 did. As we can see, G2 males came down later from the Caucasus across Turkey to the Black Sea, which could explain the appearance there of H males before they go to India. But why and how is not easily explained. To me, there may have been another female factor, mitochondrial X, that came into the story then. Another daughter of original mitochondrial N from the Caucasus to the west side of the Black Sea. H males could have been driven out of Europe by the formidable G2 and I males, who I will show would have had A blood. Hybrid rulers shared A negative blood, but only the royals remained O negative. After the dark-skinned H males left, the lighter I males spread over southern Europe, and, like G2, had a particular presence on the island of Sardinia. A lot of changes seem to involve Sardinia, and evidence of giants persists in folklore and archaeology. In this chapter we'll be covering the evidence of the changes from one group to another. Much of it is based on the picture that developed as I got more and more information and more through the alphabetical story of humankind. The pattern became more present. And we put things together with folklore and archaeology. Now this era ended with the flood of Noah. There's lots of evidence of catastrophes, more than one, as we go through the years. And evidence suggests that Noah was haplogroup I, who had shining eyes and didn't resemble his father. And this is what I was saying in chapter 1 about the haplogroup I, who is essentially different. We'll deal with I in detail later. The CF strain descendants, J1, appeared and populated what would become Samaria, Turkey and Canaan, while T1 males, descendants of the CT strain, come up from the south to compete in the next era of empires. I liken these to Japheth and Shem, while, as the biblical story goes, Elam is given Ham's ancient lands of Egypt, some inheriting mitochondrial EV blood of Judah and Babylonian kings. More in later chapters. Now the K males of CT strain were then expelled from Europe, and I will show how K go off to the east to become M, N, O, Q and lastly R hybrids. So that's the CF strain. FGHI males, the first appearance of A blood. I contend that O blood cells are changed by the CF strain to become A blood in Europeans. Remember, A blood has one extra glycoprotein in its molecular structure, and that would require new DNA to make it. For some reason, F males don't continue, and H males go to India. So it's the G2 and I2 males who sire A-blooded females in Europe. Firstly, mitochondrial X that we spoke of, and then mitochondrial R group. I contend that initially G2 males take A blood through Turkey and South Europe, and then I2 males spread it north to Scandinavia. The blood group map shows clearly the highest proportions in those areas. The first era of A blood would have been in that central Western European area, and the other areas of high A blood were either later or the colonies that came much after. And we see that A-blooded females are predominantly mitochondrial R group in Europe, the green. That is mitochondrial U, H, V, J and T, along with mitochondrial X, who came from the original mitochondrial N found in mothers before the mitochondrial R, or N9 group, appeared. More about how I think the R group of females came into Europe later. And after the first wave of the CF strain with A blood by G2 from the Caucasus Mountains to Sardinia, it seems they passed it on to the I's, who went by land and sea to Scandinavia. The haplogroup tree tells us that haplogroup I was formed 26,000 years before present during the Ice Age, yet I1 males were in Iceland and Scandinavia at the same time as I2 were in southern Europe, both apparently with A blood. Yet there was physical difference. I1 males have blue eyes and blonde hair, which the southern I's don't. So what changed the I1 males in Iceland to the tall blonde Danes? These are the parts that are difficult to show any evidence other than the links with the DNA. I don't know where the tall blonde Danes came from, but their presence up in Iceland and the north of the Scandinavian countries makes one think that they possibly came from somewhere even further north. That there may have been a time when the earth was so different and there were cataclysms that ancient ones knew where to go to be safe. There's a possibility that the mythical land of Hyperborea was in the polar region. And that's where possibly these people sought refuge at some stage and have come back from.